turn yourself into the man or woman that you would be proud of. Turn yourself into the man or the woman that you would be proud of. So in business, entrepreneurship, some people are proud of the finances on paper, but then they have a drinking problem, or they have an anger problem, or they do drugs, or they don't communicate with their family. Like, not saying everyone, but it's very common that a lot of high-level entrepreneurs and business owners, they lack a lot of other things because all they did was gung-ho business, and nobody wants to be in the mansion lonely,
right,
having personal issues. So I would ask yourself, what do I need to do to become the man or woman that I will be proud of in all areas? Because it is a reality. It's just rare to find those individuals.
I'm Junaid Ahmed, host of Hacks and Hobbies podcast and a digital presence advisor at HumbleZone. This episode is brought to you by Home Studio Mastery. I launched a consultation and course program to help podcasters and course creators to create a space in their homes that'll reduce the friction of creating content and appearing their best when showing up on camera. The pandemic gave us a lot of issues, but this one is here to stay. We're now so much closer to our audience thanks to video becoming more popular and affordable. I help guide folks who want to create Hollywood-worthy studios to not only capture great content, but also build more confidence, more authority, and be more comfortable in front of the camera. If I can do it, you can too. And with my help, you can do it faster. So if you'd like to learn more, visit homestudiomastery.com and how you too can create a home studio that brings out your personality, professionalism, and possibilities. Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. We're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life. We want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. In this episode, we have a remarkable guest with us, Derick Johnson. Derick shares his extraordinary journey from growing up with a disciplined German mother and a strict drill sergeant father to serving in the U.S. Army and becoming a martial artist. He opens up about the challenges he faced and how he turned his pain into a gift, ultimately forging a path of resilience and empathy. Yet get ready to be inspired as Derick reveals the transformative power of perseverance. Let's dive in. Johnson, Derick, thank you so much for coming on and being a guest on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So Derick, the very first thing that I love to dig into is the story, the journey, and there's so many amazing things that we go through in our lives, and we've known each other for maybe a couple of weeks, but I'm sure our guest hasn't heard where you come from, and I love to jump into the origin story to dig into what got you started and what got you here. So let's jump right in.
For sure. I appreciate it. So first off, my name is Derick Johnson, and I'm originally from Pensacola, Florida. So the Panhandle in Florida. As a child, we grew up in Germany for a couple of years because my dad was Army and my mother is German. So he was stationed in Germany. We lived there till elementary school. Then we moved to Florida, lived throughout Florida. And then I stayed there throughout college. And then also I spent 10 years in the U.S. Army as well. So growing up with the structure of a German mother, very disciplined, very gung-ho and professional, basically that's where I get my OCD from. Yeah. And then on dad's side, he was like the drill sergeant. So you had the best of both worlds when it came to discipline. So growing up, I always saw my parents up at 4 or 5 a.m., exercising, always focused. And then from the outside, everything seemed very successful. We had a beautiful house in Florida with the pool and all that, but they had very rough upbringings. So they didn't have the inner work and the inner change they needed. So I essentially became the verbal and physical punching bag growing up, which basically forged my career. And they knew I could handle it. Like I was always calm. I was a calm, quiet kid, but I was in martial arts, into fitness, and those were my outlets. So literally at 12 years old, I was listening to Tony Robbins tapes, Les Brown, just like trying to become my own psychologist. Cause I was like, all right, I know this is not normal. I got to fix this. But yeah, so growing up with the discipline and the professional side was amazing. But then on the flip side, being the receiver of other people's traumas, it more so helped me grow up and mature much faster. And looking back in hindsight, it's a blessing in disguise. And I always use the phrase, our pain is our gift. So I've always used that as fuel, which I believe anybody that's been through very dark things with family or just personal, they can connect with people on a deeper level. So I've just always been that person that I could sit at the airport and a stranger would come up and just pour out their life story. And I'm there and I'm like, hey, I don't know if I have that face or that energy or something, but I appreciate it because I know what it feels like not to have somebody to pour into or pour on. Yeah. So growing up with those parents, the discipline, and then that really forged my career in athletics along with the US Army. So being able to lead from the front and just being that quiet kid that was the observer. I would always see the trauma and all the things, but I would always take mental note, like, why is this happening? They didn't get this. And just seeing all that, I grew up hyper intelligent about my awareness, which I didn't realize was like the cheat code for careers. But it's very interesting. So like some
Yeah.
people, that's their gift, and others, they just repeat the family curses, quote unquote. But yeah, so in a nutshell,
Nice.
that's that.
That's really interesting how you've got the discipline coming from both your mom and dad, and now you're like, this is what I've got to do. So are you the only child, or do you also have siblings?
I have older sisters, so I was the youngest, but I'm also the only boy. So they didn't want to take it all on the girls, and I was the youngest, but I appreciated it. So as a kid and teen, I would always watch movies and read biographies of people that went through things way worse. So I would tell myself, I'm not allowed to complain. I have my limbs. We have a roof over our head. We live in Florida. We had a pool. So I was like, I really can't complain. I was like,
Right.
I can take what's happening. So I would always take my mind to the extremes to make the current situation minuscule, no matter like how many 300 plus days a year there was like wild nights and all that, but it
Sure.
just forged everything. So it was interesting how, and I don't know if that was faith from God or if it's just a gift, but I was always able to like zoom out from the current stressful situation to say, this is making me into something. So
Right.
as a kid and teen, I would learn these dark stories of other men and women that would succeed. And I was like, all right, they went through something way worse. Here's proof. And I would just stay in that zone. I'm not saying that works that easy for everyone. I don't know. I always resonated with it.
It is definitely a tough journey to
So in my mind, I
go
was like, I'm
through.
in the cave. Oh yeah,
But in hindsight, you're like, oh, I'm glad I went through that. But when you're in it, oh my God, when is the storm going to end?
exactly.
Right? You got to really zoom out. And one of the lessons that we have in the Muslim culture is that, hey, we are so blessed. Look at somebody who has less than us.
Yes,
We are so much blessed. We have a roof over our head. We're living in such good conditions. We got air conditioning on. Can think about people, billions of other people who don't have what we have. So we should be thankful and grateful for what we do have, and see how we can look at the silver lining of
exactly.
this. And to think about, even if you think about, you kept mentioning the word forge you into the person you are. And the funny thing is, to make swords, the sharpest sword, they go through so much heat and so much hammering down on them to be able to come out to that shiny silver blade only through perseverance, only through the hard hitting or the heat. Without that, it's not possible.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that analogy of just having that simple analogy in life. And then sometimes just zooming out, looking at people in our lives that we see as quote unquote successful. And the more we peel back the layers, we learn about them. We're like, wait a minute, he went through this.
Yeah.
No wonder. Or she went through this. And once they peel
Right.
back the layers, they're like, wow, these people are actually relatable. They're not just social media famous or social media rich. They've
Right,
actually
exactly.
been through the trenches and been through real things, and they've come out on the other side to then serve. So I've always loved learning people's journey and stories of that. But yeah, so with those things happening at home, it basically made ROTC in high school and college, and also the Army with drill sergeants in my face, it made that like a walk in the park. Because when the drill sergeants were in my face, I would try so hard not to laugh, because in my head, I was like, my 5'1" German mother would rip you guys apart, and my 6'4" dad would destroy it. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I had the craziest parents, so this is nothing. But
Right.
then I realized that I just did not have fear when it came to a violent or physical standpoint growing up. And that was to an advantage, where I realized that I was always the quote unquote father of my friend groups. I would always be the guy that took care of everybody. You need a ride, you need this. And I
Sure.
always just felt very comfortable being the protector and serving others. I always wanted to be hyper vigilant. And nowadays, looking back, I can see that even though the words "I love you" we're not really used in our household at all, I
Mm,
show so much love to strangers, clients, or whoever, because I know what it feels not to truly have that on a deep level. And I feel like that's why I'm like that friend who will be there at any given moment and actually means it. A lot of people, they just say it, but they're like, why are you calling me at 3 a.m.? I'm just like, where do you need me? Let's do it. I don't care. So it's always interesting. What somebody was lacking, they can give a
mm.
lot of in the future.
That's so true because you understand what it's like to be in those shoes. And the more it's not a remedy, right? It's not something that you would wish on anybody,
Yeah.
but going through those hot coals, or Tony Robbins, right? He does this in his events where you literally walk over fire,
Yes,
is to show you that, hey, you have the capacity to do anything that you put your mind to.
exactly. And those are interesting stories. If people can zoom back on their own life and see what they've endured, I like to always use the analogy with people and say, hey, you honestly have 100% win ratio. So if you think of your
Mm,
darkest times, you're still here, you're still alive. There's still 100 blessings you can count right now. So technically, you're undefeated. And at first, people are like, no, I'm going through them. I understand that, but let's zoom out. And then I would show them very extreme examples. I'm like, my
mm,
story is nothing. Look at this. Look at Somalia. Look at these countries, Syria,
yeah.
bombing. We don't have any of that in the States or whatever country somebody's in. It's very rare. So when they go to the extremes, they can bring themselves to the present moment. And usually with most people, it's, oh, my boss is annoying, or
Mm.
Wi-Fi was glitchy, or my microphone's not sounding the way I want, or this and that. Like there might be 20 of those small things, but
Sure.
they're more so irritated. They're not really going through any real quote unquote trauma. So
Hmm.
sometimes when we just humble ourselves for a moment and say, what am I truly complaining about? I have $1,000 phone in my hand. I
Yeah.
got $800 mic. Like we got all this stuff. What is
Yes.
really going on? So
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes we all just have to sit back for a second.
Man, but you put things in perspective, man. I absolutely appreciate that. Now, what's beautiful is that you've been a Soldier of the Year for your battalion. You've been awarded Soldier of the Year for 3 times. Tell us about that. How is that? And you showed us the pathway of where you come from, and it makes sense that you would achieve these kind of awards. But talk us through one of those achievements.
Yeah, for sure. So how it works in the US Army is you're not required to go to the board, but essentially when you go to the board means you're going up to get an award for Soldier of the Year or any other accolades. So what it
Mhm.
consists of is number one, the physical fitness tests and a lot of different physical training. Number two, you take written exams and stress, but those exams are done after days or hours of physical training. So it's
Oh my
all a mental
God.
test to see if you can still pass. So it's not just like, hey, we just had a hot breakfast. Now I'm going to go in this
Right.
classroom with air conditioning.
Yeah.
They wear you down to make sure to see if in that moment you can still tap into it and regurgitate all the knowledge that you consume.
Wow.
And then last but not least, which is most people's scaredest part or the part that they have the most fear of, is speaking to the board, where basically you walk up to a door, you pound on it, they call you in, you stand at attention by a chair, and all the higher ranks, generals, sergeant majors, all the higher ranks are sitting at a table where they're just like scorch you with that eye contact. And that's where most people crumble. I thrived in those areas because I saw that 300 plus days a year for 17
Right.
years. I was like, this is nothing. And I'm like, you guys aren't even allowed to touch me right now. So this is whatever. But I realized that I could be very calm in those moments.
Mm,
And I appreciated those. And in that regard, you take the written test, and then the verbal test is when they ask you and drill you with questions to see if you'll stumble. So this guy will say something, he'll ask you something totally different. The whole intent is to confuse you, to get you stressed, to see how you'll do. So it's very interesting. And I realized that in business, with a coaching business or marketing agency, working with a lot of clients and staff and all that, I'm able to compartmentalize situations just like in the military and still stay calm. Even though in my head, I'm probably cussing somebody out or flipping my desk over, but I don't
sure.
release it. I can handle it much better. And it's very interesting to see how those different moments forge the mind
Mm,
to stay calm and resilient in those situations. But that's essentially how it is in the US Army. Other branches, it may be different, but those are the three things: a written exam after physical, mental exhaustion, the verbal exam where they drill you in person, and then the last one is the physical training, which consists of whatever they want to create, because it's up to them. And then
sure.
from there, whoever scores the best based off all these with the percentage, then you would win male or female soldier of the year for the battalion, platoon, whatever the sector is. But it's very interesting. I just always loved the challenge, and that's the only reason I did it. Like
Amazing.
sometimes when some units they'll celebrate via email, they're like, oh, by the way, so and so got soldier of the year, and they're like, cool. Some they treat it like a big deal. They have you in front of the platoon or in front of the company, but it all depends on like the company commander. But it was more so like an internal thing that I never wanted to leave any boxes unchecked. I always try to go all out in whatever I do. So at least I know I can lay down and say, hey, I gave it all. Even if I did fail, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I just try to make sure that I left it all on the table. Because I think the worst thing for people is you see that missing piece. They're like,
We didn't do that
I
part.
should have did 3 more reps, or I should have
Mhm.
made 2 more phone calls, or my future wife turned me down because I didn't ask for another date, whatever it is.
So Derek, that is a lot of mental stress and are there ways that you found to release some pressure? Like I'm sure you've got to have the balance.
Yes, definitely. So I like to stick to the basics. So I know nowadays there's a lot of neuroscience, there's a lot of hacking, there's ice baths, there's all kinds of stuff in the social media, and it does work. But I like to keep it simple and just every day spend some time outdoors. If it's raining, if it's sunny, go on a walk and get grounded, as in take your shoes and socks off and actually feel nature.
Mm.
You don't have to be out there all day. We're not doing yoga for an hour. Just in general, just get in touch with nature because we're on devices all day long.
Yeah.
Phones, laptops, TVs. Like we're never not looking at a screen. Some people use Kindles. They don't even read because they're looking at a screen. They don't read actual books. So all day long, they're looking at screens.
Yeah.
With that being said, that's always step one. I always recommend to people 20 minutes a day, doesn't matter what time of day it is. Outside of that is I recommend people do bioenergetics. Essentially what that is, it is like a temper tantrum for adults. So it sounds funny, and if you see somebody do it, you probably will think they're on drugs. But if you look back at past cultures in Africa and Mexico, all around the world, they've all done this. And it's basically they'll jump, they'll start laughing, they'll dance, they'll cry, and it's very controlled. But essentially what I used to do is I would go to the beach in Florida at the sunrise and I would just walk. And then I would slowly start to jog. And then I would think of my past and I would start to sprint. And then I get to a point where I couldn't sprint anymore. And then I would just naturally just release. I would cry, I would laugh, and just something would take me over. And then for about 3 weeks, I'd be calm. Where I was like, all right, I need to release that. I don't know if that was what happened when I was 7, if this was from 2 years ago, but I would just release, where the rest of the month, I would literally just be calm.
Wow.
So besides those things, is I also just recommend that everybody just exercise 5 to 7 days a week. It doesn't always have to be super intense.
Sure.
I always wake up at the same time, 4 a.m. My first 2 hours are for me, and the rest of the day is all for everybody else. And it's all about just prepping the body and the mind. So those are the main things that I recommend. Get in touch with nature, have a solid morning routine where you actually have some you time opposed to waiting till night. And it just makes you way more proactive. Too many people are reactive. They hit snooze 6 times. They're late to this, they're just reacting all day long. So it's not anyone else's fault but their own. And you could sense it in their face and their body language. You're just like, yeah, your first 10 minutes, you were just annoyed when you woke up.
Oh my God. That is really interesting because I see a lot of it within my life, within my day-to-day, the people that I'm interacting with, and I kind of understand where they're coming from, and then I can see that they didn't have a great start in their morning, maybe. And sometimes you're like hesitant to tell somebody like, hey, you should do this or do that. It's like, maybe I'm not the right person to tell you that. Maybe a coach needs to tell you that, right? Sometimes it's that situation. Dude, this
Yeah, for sure. With this scenario like that, you can create a challenge as well. Like if there's a team of 10, you can say, hey, every Friday we all send an email to see who did what in the morning routine. And it's not about the amounts of things you do. It's more so, what are we doing to prep for the day? So my thing is, I run to the gym, I hit the weights, I run home, take the dog out, then I'm ready.
Yeah.
And my mind is calm and confident. So depending on what somebody's work schedule is, I would just recommend just getting active in the morning. Not that afternoon workouts are bad or night, but if you can
Right.
just prime the mind and the body in the morning, you have way more control because everyone can relate. We've all had a workout. The rest of the day, we crush sales calls, we crush
Yeah.
presentations. We're like, who showed up? Yesterday, I sucked at this. I couldn't even
Right.
get a word out. But it's interesting, just that little shift, just to tap out. And again, it always goes back to the basics. That's what I focus on a lot because
Mm,
there's a lot of things that confuse people now, social media, modalities, all those things work. But if somebody can just get down the basics, the last thing I would leave people with is waking up at the exact same time, 7 days a week. They can wake up whenever they want. I wake up early to have 2 hours to myself.
yeah.
It preps the mind, body, and I work on my faith. But if they can do that even on the weekends, they don't necessarily have to grind on a Sunday. But
Yeah.
if they just stay up, their circadian rhythm, it's much more balanced and they have way more control. So that way, every Monday, they don't have to catch up and then they don't get into the workflow till Wednesday
Right.
because they're still lagging and they can break that cycle. So
I love that so much because it's probably going to help me too because it's Wednesday, obviously, right? And I'm
yes,
catching up on things that I was working on last week, and it's okay. I should have done a little better job at engaging with this stuff. And with my wife's travel coming up next week, it's gonna be a fun week for sure.
oh yeah, you got all the kids for yourself.
Exactly, all the kids for myself. All right, we're gonna take a quick 5 minutes break, and then when we get back, you're gonna share 3 hacks to take away. You've already shared so many amazing tips that people can implement in their lives, but these 3 hacks are gonna set them apart and get them on the way to a prosperous journey. I'm Junaid Ahmed, host of Hacks and Hobbies podcast and a digital presence advisor at HumbleZone. This episode is brought to you by Home Studio Mastery. I launched a consultation and course program to help podcasters and course creators to create a space in their homes that will reduce the friction of creating content and appearing their best when showing up on camera. The pandemic gave us a lot of issues, but this one is here to stay. We're now so much closer to our audience thanks to video becoming more popular and affordable. I help guide folks who want to create Hollywood-worthy studios to not only capture great content, but also build more confidence, more authority, and be more comfortable in front of the camera. If I can do it, you can too. And with my help, you can do it faster. So if you'd like to learn more, visit homestudiomastery.com and how you too can create a home studio that brings out your personality, professionalism, and possibilities. All right, guys, we are back. We were talking to Derick Johnson, and I'm almost feeling a mindset shift because there's so much positivity that Derick is bringing to the show. And this is a positive show regardless, but there's a lot of energy in this episode, and I'm totally loving it. Derick, thank you so much. You've got 3 hacks to share for the audience, so let's jump right in.
for sure. So hack number one, before I get started, all these 3 hacks are just psychological shifts that you will say out loud or in your head. Number one is people depend on me. So the scenario is the alarm goes off and you don't feel like getting up. You want to hit snooze. You don't feel like getting on Zoom. You don't feel like whatever. Everybody's naturally selfish as humans. We're all selfish. We're like, me, why me? The next time those moments pop up, which might be today or tomorrow, say in your head or out loud, people depend on me. And like when I say it right now, I have chills on my arms because I just think of family, clients, the kid that was just as lonely as I was back then. I don't know, it just gives me a shift. Like I'm always getting teary-eyed doing it because I say it so much, but people depend on me and another part of you takes over. You get so hyper-focused that you're not worried about 3 hours of sleep or 200 milligrams of caffeine instead of whatever it is. But number one, start utilizing that phrase in your head and out loud more. People depend on me. And it's most important in the moments that we're trying to procrastinate or not do that thing. People depend on me. Somebody needs this, somebody needs that, whatever it is. We all have someone. It might not be kids. It might not be a neighbor, but somebody's watching on the internet. They might not say anything yet, but after a while, hey, I appreciate that episode, or I appreciate what you're doing. And you're like, wow, didn't even realize he or she was watching. So number one is people depend on me. Number two is turn yourself into the man or woman that you would be proud of. Turn yourself into the man or the woman that you would be proud of. So in business, entrepreneurship, some people are proud of the finances on paper, but then they have a drinking problem, or they have an anger problem, or they do drugs, or they don't communicate with their family. Like, not saying everyone, but it's very common that a lot of high level entrepreneurs and business owners, they lack a lot of other things because all they did was gung ho business, and nobody wants to be in the mansion lonely,
Right.
having personal issues. So
Yeah.
I would ask yourself, what do I need to do to become the man or woman that I will be proud of in all areas? Because it is a reality. It's just rare to find those individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And then last but not least is, how will my family be affected by my life? How will my family be affected by my life? The term legacy gets thrown around a lot. We hear it so much now that it almost has no feeling. But learning the darkest parts of your past family and your family tree can really put things into perspective. So my mother's German, so I like to think of my grandma surviving the Holocaust in the attic. So when I'm stressed, I literally will think of her in the attic and say, what am I complaining about? And it goes away.
Yeah.
She was in the attic. And then my dad is African-American. He's from Mississippi. And my great-grandpa on that side, they dealt with some other dark stuff. So I think of both and I'm like, what am I really complaining about? Yes, I was a child that heard this and that, but it was not Holocaust and it was not extreme racism at that time. So here we are. I can handle anything. So I would challenge people. The last thing with their legacy is to learn about your family tree on both sides. What do they endure? Whether you like them or not, but you're here for a reason. And once you can learn those, things start to make sense, where you're not just angry at this person. You learn their backstory, you learn grandpa's, and you're like, okay, that's why they are the way they are. And then you can have more control. So I would leave people with those three things.
Man, those are powerful. People depend on me. And what's funny is that there's 4, 5 people in my house that depend on me. Like literally, when you see your kids, okay, I gotta make sure that I'm doing all the things. But it's a great reminder for myself also, because anytime I'm feeling like I don't want to do this, I'm like, people depend on me. I gotta go do this. I gotta make this happen for them. Love that. Thank you so much.
No problem. And
Man,
the interesting thing that, sorry, good.
Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
The interesting thing that happens in those moments is you can feel that person's energy. We've all had a manager, a coach on sports team, a preacher, whoever in our life has had that energy where you can tell that they're worn out, that they're stressed, but they still show up wholeheartedly for you. And you're like, wow, he or she looks like they need some sleep, but they're still here. They didn't have to do this. And that person, they operate in that level. They're like, people depend on me. And it's inspiring and people feel it, because nowadays the culture and society is soft. So they like give up before they even felt any pain or stress. So everybody's like dwindling down. So if you can be that rare individual who still shows up for everyone else, powerful shifts happen, because that makes that deeper change than just what they see. They can feel it.
That's so good, man. That's so good. And what's beautiful, Laz, is that you've helped and worked with over 500 clients in 50 different companies. How does that make you feel to even get to that number, which is, wow, 500 people if you put in one room? Now, that's a conference.
Yes. So how it makes me feel is honestly fulfilling. The reason why, not the financial portion and everything else, but my favorite thing about what I do, whether it is for marketing clients or coaching clients, is getting that text. I just had my first date in 5 years. I overcame drinking. I haven't touched that bottle in 6 months. I'm able to fit in these pants. My husband wants to be physical with me again in the bedroom. Whatever it is, I just did my first presentation without stuttering. All those individual moments that people don't necessarily really post about, those make me the most proud, especially during the holidays. I'll look at clients, current and past. I'll look at their social media and I'm like, oh, he's got a new car. He's on a vacation. 2 years ago, he wouldn't have been able to do this. All those little moments, that fulfills me because I know they're happy. But most importantly, it's a positive ripple effect. When they're in a better mentality and take care of themselves, their kids, their wife, like everybody they come in contact with. So in terms of frequency, energy, vibration, whatever somebody wants to call it, we can positively affect people opposed to being in a low state, negatively infecting. So I would ask people, are you infecting people today or affecting people today in a positive way, and just shifting that energy?
That's such a powerful way to look at it. And it's funny that this is popping up in my head. I've been recently watching videos on magnetism, right?
Nice.
So the Earth has the North Pole and the South Pole. And funny enough, the North Pole is the stronger pole and South Pole is the weaker pole. Now, North Pole has a positive sign and the South Pole has a negative sign. And to magnetize any piece of metal, you simply need to rub magnet on it and it becomes magnetized, because what it's doing, it's positioning all the elements to point north.
Ah,
But if you were to drop that piece of element that you just positively charged, it drops that magnetism because it's now in disarray. All the elements inside it is in disarray. And that's the default state for anything at all. And if you look at the human mind, we need these positive affirmations from externally or internally
oh
to
yes,
get right back on track, right? When you're off track, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling like nothing is going the right way. So it's really, it just goes in line with the nature of things too. So that's pretty awesome.
exactly. I wanted to bounce off that. I
Yeah.
teach my clients a lot to use their alter ego if they have one. So sometimes Derick doesn't want to do anything, so I have to tap into my alter ego. Or
Mhm.
you have another alter ego. You played sports or did something in the past where you're like,
Yeah.
that guy can go for 3 days straight without sleeping. He's in that zone
Yeah.
where everybody has it to an extent, especially people that played sports. We
Mhm.
relate to it a lot. So if they're familiar with Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan,
Oh,
Cristiano
yeah.
Ronaldo, they're very gung-ho on the field or on the court, but as people, they're very laid back, quiet, charismatic. But once it's game face time, they just go all in. So I would challenge people to reignite that alter ego, or if they don't have one, maybe they've given themselves a nickname. Maybe they're 16 and they always wanted a different name. They
Right.
thought their name was corny. If they had some name, use that name and it can tap into that person as needed. So that's who wakes up at 4, who runs to the gym. Derick just wants to cuddle with his girlfriend and his dog, but my alter ego, he's killing it because people depend on me and he
Yeah.
operates at a different level where I'm like,
Oh, man.
he's half robot. I don't even know how he does it. So I just play a mental game all day.
Man, that is powerful. I love it, Derick. All right, let's jump right into the rapid fire question that I love. What is the one hobby that you wish you got into?
One hobby I wish I got into, I would say stand-up comedy,
Hmm.
because most comedians have been through some dark stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they use comedy to help others. And being in the military, we all have dark humor. So
Mhm.
I would definitely say stand-up comedy would be something that I feel like I could get on stage and just talk about stuff, but definitely.
Oh, man, that's good. That would be a fun show to watch. So when you do get into that, please let me know. I want to go. I want to come see you.
Oh yeah, for
I
sure.
love comedy. I love comedy. All right. What did you want to be when you were a child?
I wanted to be someone that I needed,
Mm.
be someone that I needed. At first, I thought about athletics, doing all the main goals a child or a teen would have, but
Mhm.
the darker life got, I just wanted to be like people's superhero. So I always told myself, I'm going to turn myself physically and mentally into a superhero and give that guide to the world. And it sounds crazy to say because I was so young, but that's just what I saw, because all I watched was Rocky, Bruce Lee, and all this stuff. And I just tried to basically brainwash myself into positivity while going through those things. So
That's
it
amazing.
worked.
It did work. Wow. Those were some crazy stuff. Crazy stuff for sure. All right. What is your favorite movie or TV show?
Favorite movie is Scarface.
Oh, wow.
I do illegal things, but just in terms of the mentality of anybody that just
Mhm.
dominates and does what they say they will, and in terms of like foreigners coming to America or whatever country they go to, and obviously he went into the drug space, but in
Yeah.
general, just that mentality of anybody that just goes all out, it just always inspired me. And in terms of music, a lot of artists have similarities to Scarface and all that,
Sure.
so I always was drawn to those type of stories.
Nice. All right. Next question is going to be fun. What movie would you choose if you got to play a character in it?
I would choose I Am Legend
Hmm.
and play the character of Will Smith.
Yes.
Because for each person that has seen it, it has a different feeling or a different meaning to them.
Mhm. No, that was a really good movie for sure. And Will Smith played some really amazing characters.
Oh yeah, people forget all the good roles that he had.
I
They
know, right?
see they see the personal drama or the fabricated drama, and they forget how good of an actor he really is.
It's pretty crazy. In fact, I had a guest on the podcast who got to work with Will Smith on Independence Day.
Awesome.
And how Will Smith researched and he said, hey, what movie should I get into that's going to really put me on top? And sci-fi action movies is the entry key to really kick it up a notch. So that was pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Who is your favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero? He's not Marvel or DC, but his name is Greg Plitt, the legendary Greg Plitt. He was a U.S. Army officer and fitness model. Besides coaching and the military, I used to model. And he's the one that got me into it because he's not just fitness model, but he also inspired so many people. So in college, when I was going through things, I would literally go to gregplitt.com and watch videos. And he would be in his mansion, just like pouring his heart out to the world. It was crazy. I was like, wait, he's in shape, helping millions of people. They come up to him crying at the expos. And he was just like a walking anomaly. I was like, I want to do what he's doing. So if people don't know who that is, they use his body a lot still to this day in a lot of Marvel and DC movies.
Oh, interesting.
So he passed away, but if you look up Greg Plitt on YouTube, you're going to want to run through a wall and do push-ups for an hour right when you hit play. So,
oh my God, I love it. All right, last question. If you were a board game, what would it be?
What was that? If I was a board
If
game?
you were a board game, what would it be?
I would say Monopoly.
Yeah, Monopoly is it's an awesome game. And that sounds exciting. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Derick, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey, the amazing hacks, as well as the wisdom that you've acquired over your lifetime. We can't wait to bring you back in a future episode and learn where you've come since the last.
I really appreciate it.
Episode.
Thanks again for having me. And I hope somebody can take at least 1 or 2 nuggets from this and utilize it.
Absolutely, man. What's your favorite place for you to connect with? We're going to be sharing all the links in the show notes anyways, but what's your favorite platform?
My favorite platform is Instagram. It just feels more personal, and that is Fit with Derick 2. Fit with Derick and then number 2 at the end. My whole intent of that is to show a daily process where I'll tell my clients and friends that I don't miss. Like I barely sleep, and I'm like, if you see me not missing, that means you should go harder. And I'm just fully transparent about everything, where I'm like, hey, same guy online, the same guy in person.
I love it.
I'm not for everyone, but if you resonate with raw energy, then hey, I might be for you.
Let's go. Awesome. Thank you again, Derick. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode on Hacks and Hobbies. We absolutely appreciate your contribution. You can find additional notes on hacksandhobbies.com. Please share the podcast with your friends and tell them what you learned about our guest today.